One night, when I was 15, my best friend Anthony invited me over to stay the weekend, since his parents were out of town. I rode my bike to his place, parked it in the backyard, and let myself in through the back door. We played every video game he had, from FIFA to Call of Duty, with popcorn and snacks scattered all over the floor. As the night wore on, we got bored with games and switched to watching a movie. Before long, we got tired of that too, so we decided to try prank calling people. Around 10 p.m, Anthony made a few calls to random pizza places, then it was my turn. I dialed a few random numbers, hoping someone would pick up. On the fourth try, a man with a deep, rough voice answered with a gruff, "Yeah?" instead of the usual, "Hello?" Anthony was laughing in the background, making it hard for me to keep a straight face, but I managed to stammer out my question. "Would it be alright if I borrowed one of the wheels from your car?" The man paused, then replied, "What's your name, kid?" I blurted out. "My name's Bob." But then he asked in a chilling tone, "Are you sure it's not Anthony?" It hit me like a punch to the gut. I looked over at Anthony, who looked terrified. Without a second thought, I hung up the phone. I asked Anthony, "Who was that?" He stammered, I don't know." I suggested he call his dad, but he refused. He wasn't supposed to have anyone over that weekend. Trying to shake it off, we returned to our movie and forgot about the call, but a little later we heard the front storm door creak open and the doorknob twist. It stopped short due to the lock. Anthony quickly turned off the TV, and I tiptoed to the window to peek outside. There was a tall figure standing by the front door. He noticed the movement of the blinds and turned to look directly at me. I dropped the blinds and ran back to the kitchen, motioning for Anthony to follow me. We hid there, listening. Moments later, we heard the sound of the backyard gate creaking open right outside the kitchen window. My heart sank. I'd forgotten to shut the back door. Anthony urged me to close it quickly. I crept down the hall towards the back door, but froze in place. The silhouette of a man stood just outside, peering into the house. I darted back to the kitchen, and we made a quiet dash upstairs to his room, crawling under his bed. He had a cloth hanging from the edge that hid us from view. The man's footsteps moved slowly through the house, then started up the stairs. They stopped just outside the door to the room. The door creaked open. I could hear Anthony's heavy breathing beside me, and I was afraid it might give us away. I reached over to cover his mouth as we lay motionless, listening. Then, footsteps moved towards the closet. We heard hangers sliding as the man searched through Anthony's clothes. Finally, he approached the bed and paused, mere inches away from us. My heart was racing. I whispered to Anthony, "Do you think we could make a run for it?" Before he could respond, the silence shattered with a terrifying scream as the man dragged Anthony out from under the bed. Desperately, I grabbed a screwdriver from the nightstand and plunged it into the man's back. He screamed in pain and released Anthony, giving us a chance to escape. We sprinted outside, but didn't dare run down the road. Instead, we hid in the trees, crouching behind a bush as we watched the man exit the house, looking around the yard. He turned towards the woods, scanning the darkness. I held my breath, praying he couldn't see us. Eventually, he turned back and went inside. When we felt safe, we crept back to the house, this time remembering to lock the back door. Anthony called the police while I watched the backyard through the window. When I turned on the outdoor light, I saw him again, standing by a tree at the edge of the woods, watching us. Then he disappeared into the darkness. That was the last time we ever saw him. 5 years have passed, and nothing similar has happened since. Sometimes I wonder if that prank call triggered the whole thing, though I still don't understand how he knew Anthony's name. Regardless, that was the night my best friend and I narrowly escaped what could have been a tragic break-in. My wife and I have had our fair share of arguments, but there was one night where things hit a boiling point. She was going on and on about the smallest things, even getting furious over me forgetting to put the toilet seat down. Her voice was so piercing that I finally decided I needed a break. I called up my buddy Paul, and he told me I could crash at his place for the night. Exhausted, I took him up on it. I just needed some space. Paul had a big house, something my wife often pointed out, nagging me about how all my friends had nicer places than ours. That night, Paul and I had a few beers and talked about life. He suggested I stay as long as I needed, but I assured him I'd only be there for one night. I didn't want to be a burden. He showed me to one of his 3 guest bedrooms, which he rarely used. In fact, he kept 2 of them locked up, only planning to open them if he ever threw a party or had extra guests. The guest rooms were all lined up next to each other, with Paul's bedroom across the hall. A slightly odd setup, but it was fine. After turning in for the night, though, I started hearing strange noises coming from the next room over. I thought Paul might be in there moving things around, but the noises kept going, and it was starting to get annoying. I went to Paul's room, cracked the door open, and asked if he was hearing it too. He was already in bed and claimed he hadn't heard anything. When I asked why he kept the other 2 rooms locked, he said they held personal items and were better off secured. He told me to go back to sleep and let him know if I heard it again. Reluctantly, I went back to bed, and things seemed to quiet down. Just as I was about to drift off, I heard a faint tapping on the wall, followed by what sounded like a whisper. Startled, I shot up and went back to Paul's room. This time he took me seriously. Grabbing the key, he unlocked the door to the room next to mine. As we stepped in, a cold breeze hit us. The window was wide open, and so was the closet door. Paul went through the room, clearly alarmed. The bed had faint indentations, as if someone had been lying there, and the closet was full of empty bags. Worse still, the valuables he had stored in the drawers were missing. Realizing something was very wrong, Paul ran to the other locked guest room, with me right behind him. He unlocked the door, and the first thing we saw was a dark figure climbing out the window onto the patio roof. Paul was about to leap after him, but instead we both raced out through the back door, hoping to catch him. Unfortunately, he was already gone. Looking around, we returned to the room to see what was left behind, and the sight was disturbing. The bed's white sheets were stained with blood, and on the closet floor was Paul's missing butcher knife, speckled with dried blood. All of his valuables were gone. It hit us that someone, most likely homeless and possibly dangerous, had been living in his house for a while, right under his nose. During our earlier chat, Paul had joked about how fast his food was disappearing, despite being so thin. Now it made sense. To this day, neither of us knows exactly who was in his house, and as far as we know, they were never caught. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was my first sleepover, a milestone in my childhood. My friend Jordan had invited me over, and we were both 10 years old. Jordan had a huge basement, perfect for us to play video games until past midnight. We skipped brushing our teeth like 2 little rebels and went straight to the couches to sleep. I drifted off quickly, comfortable on the couch. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. The TV was still on, displaying a blank screen that gave off a faint, dim light. It was just enough to illuminate something in the far corner of the basement, near the stairs. There was a tall, shadowy figure that seemed to almost reach the ceiling. I couldn't make out exactly what it was or describe it, but the eerie shape filled me with dread. Then the TV shut off, plunging the room into darkness, which was almost enough to make me scream. I squeezed my eyes shut, staying completely still, and somehow I eventually drifted back to sleep. I was jolted awake by a loud, chilling scream coming from upstairs. Jordan woke up too, and we exchanged terrified looks before sprinting upstairs to his parents' room. His mum was sitting on the bed, crying, while his dad frantically searched the room, moving things around as if looking for someone. He pushed past us, rushing through the house to check for intruders, but after a thorough search, he found nothing. No sign of forced entry, and no sign that anyone else had been there. Jordan and I are still friends to this day. The last time I brought it up, he mentioned that his mum avoids talking about that night. However, she once admitted that she saw a tall, dark figure standing by their bedroom door that night. I have no doubt that what I saw in the basement was the same thing that terrified her upstairs.